Joker, Folie, Deux was not very good. It's basically an extension of the first movie without most of the things that made the first movie even vaguely interesting.
What the world needs now is a love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love.
Tell us, what's changed, Arthur?
I'll tell you what's changed. I'm not alone anymore. That's what we should be talking about.
The first movie was telling the story of the kind of mentally ill loner guy who is nonetheless compelling. In this case, he was compelling because he was playing the role of a character that's very well known in the culture, that has a lot of interesting things about him. And so it was interesting seeing him because we were like, well, what's he going to do? When is he going to break out and go crazy like the character we're familiar with? And eventually he did. But this film doesn't do that. It's really more of an epilogue for the first film. It's him in jail, and then he's on trial a little bit, and then some other stuff happens. And in the meantime, he meets Lady Gaga, and they have some sort of quasi-relationship unfold. But that's it. And in execution, a lot of it is pretty boring and pretty unexciting. When it was announced that the Joker sequel was going to be a musical, I think some people were skeptical about switching mediums like that. But I actually thought it had a lot of potential to be really, really good. That may seem unusual for the genre, but the Joker, in his appearance and mannerisms, is rooted in vaudeville routines from the 20s and 30s and 40s. And that is a sister, or at least a relative, to the emerging Broadway scene and the emerging musical theater scene that happened in the 30s and 40s and 50s. To see the trailers combining music from that era with the characters' trappings, and then adding in Lady Gaga, who's an amazingly talented performer, and musical performer specifically, it seemed like there was a good chance to make something really exciting and compelling. Joker the musical? Maybe that sounds weird, but that sounds great in ways. There have been musicals of, I think, a lot of things that might be considered absurd, but if you do it well, it works. Especially considering the characters are in a prison, you could consider it a kind of comic book Girl Interrupted musical. People in an enclosed space learning to find meaning in life through song and various other things. But that is not what the film does. It definitely tries because it has a lot of songs. Let's give it credit for that. They keep trying to pump them out there and make them interesting and make execution interesting and have them appear in a variety of settings. And, I think it was really bold to try in the first place. But it wasn't enough to just have them be interesting and have a lot of them. They had to be performed well. I want to give a bit of a pass on this because, honestly, it's really, really hard to make movie musicals. It's hard to make musicals by themselves. Most musicals aren't successful. And then it's really hard to make movie musicals because, as I've talked about when I talked about Wicked, musicals thrive when they have something serious to talk about, but then they talk about it in a theatrical way. But then when they get adapted for film, they're often squeezed into a family-friendly genre because people think musicals are family-friendly. And that ends up mutating the source material and making it bad. And I would say this does something similar. It tries to be a story about lonely people finding connection, and of course, song and dance is a great way to express the happiness of connection. But it's just not, proper show-level quality performance, or at the very least from Joaquin Phoenix. I think Lady Gaga certainly provided a great performance, but it has to work all together. It can't just be one element that's working. It has to all work. And Joaquin Phoenix's performance, as established in the last movie, continuing this one, does not quite fit. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much. I think this movie was basically a cash grab. It made $1 billion at the box office. They would be idiots to not say we're making anything we can out of this. But in ways, maybe that obligation to make it resulted in something that didn't have a ton of artistic vision behind it because they knew they had to do it. And maybe they were just like, whatever, let's get it out there. We're not sure if there's actually any good ideas left. Let's just make it and move on. In ways, it was kind of a curtain call for the success of the last movie, and honestly, maybe not a ton more, at least this time around. But that's okay. The Joker brand is amazing. They took a few swings at it. Some hits connected, some didn't. Everyone got paid. They got to do some interesting shooting. And DC movies are going to keep getting made. I think with the upcoming Superman reboot, we are going to see a total transformation of the culture in the best way possible. I think there is a fighting chance that the new Superman will be the new Marvel movies of the next decade. it will revitalize the culture. And if they play it right, it will change the world in a good way. Overall, I would not recommend this film. It was overlong, although it was only 2 hours and 13 minutes, but it was paced not the best. It wasn't super interesting in its plot. It was kind of interesting in execution, but not a ton. It really wasn't really worth a ton of time, I would say. If you want to go see it just to say you saw it, or for the irony value or meme value, then sure. But other than that, I wouldn't really recommend it.